Into the storm. The emergency beacon cut through the static like a desperate whisper in the cosmic void. Commander Sarah Chen sat forward in her captain's chair aboard the UES Resilient Dawn, her weathered hands gripping the armrests as the alien transmission filled the bridge with its haunting melody. Lieutenant Zara Okafor looked up from her communications console, her dark eyes wide with concern. The young Nigerian officer had heard distress calls before, but never one quite like this. The signal was coming from Kepler 442b, a planet so far from civilized space that most species considered it the edge of nowhere. "Commander, I'm getting a translation through the Universal Protocol," Zara reported, her fingers dancing across the holographic display. "It's from a Zephyrian research station. They're requesting immediate evacuation assistance." Sarah's gray eyes narrowed as she studied, the star charts appearing on the main screen. At 38, she had spent half her life in space, but she still carried the marks of her youth in the Australian outback. The scars on her hands came from wrestling with broken machinery and dust storms that could strip paint from metal. Her face, weathered by 2 decades of solar radiation, showed the kind of experience that came from surviving places where survival wasn't guaranteed. "Zephyrians don't usually ask for help," she said, standing and walking to the communications station. "They're too proud. If they're calling for rescue, the situation must be critical." Dr. Marcus Webb looked up from his engineering console, his broad shoulders filling out his uniform. The 45-year-old former deep-sea rescue specialist had joined the space service after spending 20 years pulling people out of situations that should have killed them. His beard was streaked with gray, and his hands showed the scars of 1,000 emergency repairs in impossible conditions. "I'm reading the planetary data now," Marcus said, his voice carrying a slight tremor of excitement rather than fear. "Kepler 442b is experiencing a massive electromagnetic storm system, the kind that happens once every few thousand years when all 3 of its moons align." Chief Petty Officer Ivan Volkov grunted from his position at the tactical station. The 52-year-old Russian had spent his youth in the Siberian mines, where men learned to work in conditions that would kill most people in minutes. His massive frame and perpetually oil-stained hands marked him as someone who could make anything work, even when it shouldn't. "Electromagnetic storms," Ivan muttered in his thick accent. "Bah. In Siberia we called Tuesday." Zara's console chimed with an incoming transmission. "Commander, I'm receiving multiple signals from the area. It looks like other ships have responded to the distress call." The main screen split into several sections, showing the positions of various vessels near Kepler 442b. Sarah recognized the configurations immediately. A Galactic Council heavy cruiser, one of the massive ships that served as mobile diplomatic stations. An Altarian science vessel, sleek and efficient like everything the logical Altarians built. A Centauri trading consortium ship, probably hoping to profit from whatever situation they found. "Are any of them moving to assist?" Sarah asked. Zara monitored the communications traffic for several minutes, her expression growing more troubled with each passing second. "No, Commander. They're all maintaining safe distances. The Galactic Council ship is requesting additional data. The Altarians are running computational models. The Centauri are calculating risk-to-profit ratios." "What about the storm?" Marcus asked, pulling up detailed scans of the planet's atmosphere. "How bad is it?" The main screen filled with swirling patterns of electromagnetic energy that looked more like abstract art than weather. Lightning bolts the size of continents danced across the planet's surface, while the upper atmosphere churned with forces that could tear apart most starships. "The electromagnetic interference is off the charts," Marcus continued, studying his readings. "Any ship trying to reach the surface would have to navigate through energy discharges that could overload every system on board. The gravitational stress from the 3 moons is creating tidal forces that are literally reshaping the planet's surface." Ivan laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "So? In mining tunnels, we dealt with cave-ins, gas explosions, and equipment failures every day. This is just bigger cave." A new transmission arrived, this time from the Galactic Council cruiser. The screen filled with the image of Ambassador Threnody, a tall, elegant being whose species had evolved on a world so stable that they had never experienced natural disasters. Her crystalline features showed the kind of calm that came from never having faced genuine danger. "Human vessel," Ambassador Threnody said, her voice carrying the musical quality of her people. "We have completed our analysis of the situation on Kepler 442b. The rescue operation presents a 97.3% probability of mission failure and total crew loss. The Galactic Council recommends that all vessels maintain safe distance while we coordinate with proper rescue authorities." Sarah's expression didn't change, but something cold and hard settled behind her eyes. "Ambassador, what's the timeline for these proper rescue authorities to arrive?" "Our estimates suggest that specialized equipment could be deployed within 14 to 16 standard days," the ambassador replied. "We understand this is unfortunate for the stranded researchers, but safety protocols must be observed." 14 days, Zara whispered, checking the original distress signal. "Commander, the Zephyrians reported their life support systems were failing when they sent the distress call. They estimated they had maybe 48 hours of breathable atmosphere left." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Sarah looked at each of her crew members in turn, seeing her own thoughts reflected in their faces. They were humans, from Earth, a world that had tried to kill their species every single day for millions of years. They had evolved in a place where hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, ice ages, and mass extinctions were just part of life. Other species called Earth a Deathworld because they couldn't imagine surviving there for a single day. But humans had done more than survive. They had thrived. "Dr. Webb," Sarah said finally, "what would we need to modify our ship to handle those electromagnetic storms?" Marcus was already pulling up schematics before she finished the question. "We'd need to reroute power through the backup conduits and install additional shielding around the critical systems. I can use some of the emergency hull patches to create a Faraday cage around the bridge and engineering sections." "How long?" Sarah asked. "Give me 4 hours," Marcus replied without hesitation. "Ivan, what about navigation through those gravitational fields?" The big Russian was studying the moon. Alignment data. His scarred fingers tracing patterns on his console. In Siberian winter, sometimes you cannot see where you are going, but you learn to feel the ice to know when it will crack. These gravity fields, they have rhythm, like ice breaking up in spring. I can feel the pattern. Zara looked up from her communications station. "Commander, the other ships are monitoring our conversations. The Altarians are transmitting calculated warnings about our illogical decision-making process. The Centauri are offering to purchase salvage rights to our ship." Sarah walked to the main view screen, looking out at the distant star system where 43 Zephyrian researchers were waiting to die. She could almost feel the weight of their desperation across the light years that separated them. "Open a channel to all ships in the area," she ordered. When the connection was established, Sarah faced the screen with the kind of calm that came from growing up in a place where death was always one mistake away. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the UES Resilient Dawn. We've received the distress call from the Zephyrian Research Station and we're moving to assist." Ambassador Threnody's crystalline features showed something that might have been concern. "Commander Chen, surely you understand the impossibility of what you're suggesting. No ship can survive those electromagnetic storms. The gravitational stresses alone would tear your vessel apart." "Maybe," Sarah replied, "but we're going to try anyway." The Altarian science officer appeared on screen, his logical mind clearly struggling with the concept. "Commander, our computational models show a 2.7% chance of mission success. This is not logical behavior." Sarah smiled, and there was something in that expression that made the alien officers unconsciously step back from their screens. It was the smile of someone who had learned to laugh at death. "You're right," she said. "It's not logical. It's human." The transmission ended, and Sarah turned back to her crew. "All right, people. We have 4 hours to turn this ship into something that can survive the impossible. Marcus, start your modifications. Ivan, plot us a course through those gravity fields. Zara, monitor the Zephyrian signals, and let me know the moment their situation changes." As her crew leaped into action, Sarah remained standing at the view screen. Behind them, 3 alien vessels continued their careful observations and calculations. Ahead of them lay a storm system that could destroy their ship and kill them all. But somewhere in that maelstrom, 43 beings were waiting for someone to prove that the impossible was just another word for Tuesday. The resilient Dawn changed course toward Kepler 442b, and across the galaxy other species began to learn something new about the humans from the death world called Earth. They didn't calculate odds. They didn't run risk assessments. They didn't wait for someone else to solve the problem. They just came when called, no matter what stood in their way. And that was about to change everything. What humans do. The resilient Dawn bucked and twisted as it entered the outer edge of Kepler 442b's electromagnetic storm system. Lightning the size of mountain ranges lashed across space, each bolt containing enough energy to power a city for a year. The ship's hull groaned under stresses that should have torn it apart, but Marcus Webb's modifications held firm. Hull integrity at 87% and holding, Marcus reported from his engineering station, sweat beading on his forehead as he manually rerouted power through systems that were never designed to handle this kind of abuse. The Faraday cage is working, but we're getting some feedback through the secondary circuits. Commander Sarah Chen gripped her command chair as another massive electromagnetic pulse washed over them. The bridge lights flickered, and several consoles sparked, but the ship pressed on. Through the main view screen, the storm-racked planet filled their vision like an angry god. "Ivan, talk to me about those gravity fields," Sarah called over the noise of straining metal. Chief Petty Officer Ivan Volkov's massive hands moved across his navigation controls with surprising delicacy. His eyes were closed, and he seemed to be listening to something only he could hear. "Duh, Commander," is like listening to heartbeat of dying giant. The 3 moons, they pull and push, but there is rhythm. Wait. Wait. Now, the ship suddenly lurched to starboard, and for a moment they were flying sideways through a gravitational anomaly that existed between the conflicting pulls of the 3 moons. It was impossible navigation by any known standard, but Ivan had learned to read the signs in places where maps didn't exist. "Zara, any word from the research station?" Sarah asked. Lieutenant Zara Okafor's communications array was fighting to penetrate the electromagnetic interference surrounding the planet. "I'm getting intermittent signals, Commander. Their life support is down to 18 hours and falling faster than expected. The storm is affecting their power systems too." On the long-range sensors, the 3 alien observer ships maintained their safe distances. Their crews watched in what could only be described as fascination, mixed with horror, as the human vessel dove deeper into what they had calculated as certain death. Aboard the Galactic Council cruiser, Ambassador Threnody turned to her science officer. "Are our sensors malfunctioning? The human ship appears to be adapting to conditions that should destroy it." "No malfunction, Ambassador," the science officer replied, his voice filled with confusion. "They're flying through gravitational anomalies using no detectable navigation system. Their ship's hull should have buckled under the electromagnetic stress, but somehow their modifications are holding. How is this possible?" The science officer studied his readings for a long moment. "I believe they're improvising, Ambassador, making decisions based on intuition rather than calculation." Ambassador Threnody's crystalline features showed something approaching shock. In her species' long history, they had never encountered a situation that couldn't be solved through careful analysis and logical planning. The concept of successful improvisation was almost incomprehensible. Meanwhile, aboard the resilient Dawn, the crew was doing exactly what their species had been doing for millennia, adapting to survive. "Commander, I'm picking up a clearer signal." "From the surface," Zara reported. "The research station is located in an underground facility about 2 kilometers down. The Zephyrians built it to study the planet's geological processes, but the storm is causing seismic activity that's threatening the structural integrity." Sarah studied the surface scans appearing on her screen. The planet below was a nightmare of electrical storms and shifting tectonics. The 3 moons were pulling at the crust itself, creating earthquakes that registered off the scale. Any sane species would have evacuated the planet years ago. The Zephyrians aren't built for this kind of environment, Marcus observed, reading the species data on his console. They evolved on a world with stable weather patterns and low gravity. This storm system would be like us trying to survive on the surface of Jupiter. But they're scientists, Sarah replied. They came here to study something important, enough to risk their lives. What were they researching? Zara's console chimed with an incoming transmission. The signal was weak and broken with static, but a Zephyrian face appeared on the screen. The alien was tall and slender, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that showed both intelligence and desperate hope. Human vessel, the Zephyrian said, his voice barely audible through the interference. I am Dr. Keelan Tier, director of the research station. We cannot believe you came. The other ship said rescue was impossible. Dr. Keelan Tier, this is Commander Chen. We're going to get you out of there. What's your current status? We have 43 researchers trapped in the lower levels. The upper sections have been compromised by seismic activity. Our power systems are failing, and we estimate 12 to 15 hours of life support remaining. Sarah exchanged glances with her crew. They were cutting it very close, even by human standards. Doctor, we're going to need to bring our ship down to the surface. Is there anywhere we can land safely? Dr. Keelan Tier's expression became even more worried. Commander, you don't understand. The surface is experiencing constant electrical storms and seismic activity. The electromagnetic interference is so intense that it will disable any technology not specifically hardened against it. Marcus looked up from his console with the kind of grin that meant he was about to suggest something completely insane. Commander, I've been thinking about that. What if we don't try to fight the storm? What if we use it? Explain. Back on Earth, I did deep-sea rescues in the North Atlantic. When you're working in extreme conditions, sometimes the best approach is to work with the environment instead of against it. These electromagnetic pulses are incredibly powerful, but they're also predictable. If we time it right, we could use the storm's own energy to power our descent. Ivan nodded slowly. Is like riding avalanche down mountain. Very dangerous, but if you know how to read the snow. It's completely insane, Zara said, but she was smiling. Which means it's probably going to work. Sarah made her decision with the kind of speed that came from a lifetime of split-second choices between life and death. Do it. Marcus, configure our systems to tap into the storm's energy. Ivan, find us a path down that won't kill us all. Zara, keep that communication link open. The next few minutes were controlled chaos as the crew prepared for what was essentially a controlled crash landing, powered by one of the most violent storm systems in the known galaxy. The ship's systems were reconfigured in ways that violated every safety protocol in the manual. But humans had never been particularly concerned with following rules when lives were at stake. Beginning descent, Ivan announced, his voice calm despite the fact that he was essentially flying blind through a maelstrom. Hold on to something. The resilient dawn plunged into Kepler 442b's atmosphere like a falling star. Lightning bolts, the size of skyscrapers, reached out to caress the ship's hull, and instead of destroying them, the modified systems channeled that energy into their descent engines. It was impossible by every known law of physics, but it worked, because humans had learned long ago that impossible was just another word for difficult. Surface approach in 30 seconds, Ivan called out. I see the research station is built into mountainside. Very good placement. Through the view screen, they could see the Zephyrian facility carved into solid rock. It was an impressive piece of engineering, but the mountain itself was coming apart under the stress of the gravitational tides. Massive cracks ran through the stone and entire sections were sliding away into the valleys below. Landing site identified, Ivan continued. Is small plateau about half kilometer from station entrance. Will be bumpy landing. Define bumpy, Sarah said. Is hard to say. Maybe we all die, maybe we just get very bruised. The ship touched down with an impact that rattled every bolt and rivet in its frame. For a moment, everything was silent except for the constant rumble of the storm overhead. Then Marcus's voice came through the comm system. We're down and intact. Hull integrity is at 71%. But all critical systems are operational. The electromagnetic shielding is holding. But we need to move fast. This storm is only going to get worse. Sarah stood up, testing her balance on the unstable ground. All right, people. Ivan, you're with me. We're going to get those researchers and bring them home. Marcus, keep the ship ready for immediate takeoff. Zara maintained communication with the station and monitor the other ships. As Sarah and Ivan suited up for the rescue operation, Zara's console chimed with multiple incoming transmissions from the observer ships. The alien crews had watched in stunned silence as the human vessel had done something they had calculated as impossible. Commander, Zara reported, the Galactic Council ship is requesting detailed logs of our approach. The Altarians want to know how we modified our navigation systems. And the Centauri are asking if we're available for hire. Sarah laughed, a sound that carried no humor but plenty of determination. Tell them we'll talk later. Right now we have people to save. The surface of Kepler 4b42b was everything the aliens had warned it would be, and worse. The ground shook constantly under the gravitational stress of the 3 moons, and lightning strikes turned the air itself into a weapon. But humans had evolved, on a world where nature tried to kill them every day, and they had learned to thrive in places where other species couldn't survive. The rescue operation took 4 hours. 4 hours of moving through collapsing tunnels and failing life support systems. 4 hours of carrying researchers who weren't built for the planet's crushing gravity. 4 hours of making split-second decisions while the mountain came apart around them. But when the resilient dawn lifted off from Kepler 442b's surface, all 43 Zephyrian researchers were aboard. Dr. Keelan Tier stood on the bridge as they cleared the atmosphere, his large eyes filled with something approaching awe. Commander Chen, I must ask, why did you come? Your species had nothing to gain from this rescue. The other ships calculated the odds and chose safety. Sarah looked out at the storm-racked planet falling away below them. In the distance, the 3 observer ships were already moving to escort them to safety. She thought about the question, for a long moment, trying to find words that would explain something that was simply part of being human. Doctor, she said finally, on our world, we have a saying, leave no one behind. It doesn't matter if the odds are good or bad. It doesn't matter if it's logical or profitable. If someone calls for help, we answer. Even if it means risking your own lives? Sarah smiled, and for the first time since the rescue began, it was a warm expression instead of a cold one. Especially, then, that's what humans do. As they headed back toward civilized space, the 3 alien observer ships fell into formation around them, but something had changed in those few hours. The transmissions from the other vessels carried a new tone of respect, and perhaps even a little fear. The galaxy had learned something important about the species from the death world called Earth. They didn't just survive impossible situations. They thrived in them. And when others gave up hope, humans were just getting started. Word of the rescue would spread through the galactic community within days. Soon, every species would know that when the impossible needed to be done, when hope was lost and all calculations showed failure, there was one species that would answer the call. The humans were coming, and they didn't care about the odds.